Dr. Chuck the Science Schmuck. Synchronize. Okay, this is actually the third time I've tried to film this video because my brain keeps stopping. It's the weirdest thing. I'll be thinking and then suddenly I'm not thinking at all, which probably means I need a little more coffee. Cold. Yeah, this was full when I started. So what am I doing today? Well, today you're going to help me recreate an experiment I once did to see if it's repeatable. Now, the material that I'm referring to specifically is an old project. Oh, it's a heavy old project. Where I made these. My body armor experiment previously kind of reminded me of it. So that they're a little moldy because they've been in my basement and it is very moist down here. But these are a form of black substance similar to ceramic, but not really quite ceramic because ceramic is a sintered material, meaning that... Oh no. I've gotten dirty. But ceramic is a sintered material where you actually take silica or potentially another oxide and melt it enough so that it can be fused and sintered together, which, like glass, is pure silica that's been melted down and forged like that. Concrete isn't quite the same thing. So, what is concrete? I got a big old bag of good old Quickcrete here. It's an amazingly cheap substance. This big 60-pound bag that I can barely lift cost about $5, which may be dating me. I don't know. By the time anyone views this, it might be $1,000 because of inflation. But it's very cheap in America because we have a very heavy domestic production of cement, which cement is the material in concrete that makes concrete concrete. It causes it to become concreted. It creates concretions. There's some very discrete concretions. The chemical process of that system is actually very complicated and not actually that well understood. And I'm sure there's inorganic chemists who have a pretty good idea of it, but it's a little bit beyond me. I never took inorganic chemistry. Essentially, it's a calcium-based reaction where the cement in the concrete reacts to fuse a mixture of sand and rocks, which are called aggregate, together into a hard substance. Even underwater, concrete was actually commonly used by the ancient Romans. It was considered almost a miraculous piece of Roman technology that they had this substance which could be poured and would harden, especially underwater. The Romans built docks and stuff. It wasn't like it is today. It's not as technologically advanced, but they definitely had it 2,000 years ago. And again, it's amazingly cheap in the United States, although I've heard, and you may need to fact check me on this because I've heard this way second or third hand, that there's actually a shortage in some other countries like India right now where a bag like this would cost you about 100 American dollars. Which if you just wanted one bag is enough to put a fence post down. This basement probably uses a couple tons. An actual skyscraper probably uses a few thousand tons to build the structure. So, what do I have in front of me? Other than this coffee that I keep perpetually drinking, I have this mold, which I've made. Now, normally the type of mold I make is hairy and usually green in color, and it usually tastes kind of funny, because you can eat moldy bread. I'm not going to let that mold steal my bread. I'm going to eat it with vim and vigor. So I have this cube. It is a, ooh. Hold on a second, I've stirred up some concrete dust and inhaled it. Excuse me. That is a concrete. The cement is a very fine powder, and it will get in your lungs if you work too much with it. But anyway, this is a cube, which will serve as a mold. It's just wood. I didn't show you me cutting this because it's very boring and screwing it together. I have hot glued it down with the hot glue gun on the sides so that there's not a gap. And I will be making a cube, or attempting to make a cube, of this substance following the same procedure that I did. Why a cube? I don't know about you, but I've always, there's this enjoyment of geometric shapes that are solid and heavy. You're probably not old enough. I'm 41, so I went to school a long time ago. Back then, when we had computers, if we even had computers, the mouse had a ball in it. This is a tangent. It had a leaden ball in the middle that was coated in rubber, which would turn as you rolled the mouse, and it turned machines inside the mouse that would determine where it goes. We didn't have optic mice. They had to glue those closed because kids would steal the balls. Why? They wouldn't throw them. It's just there was something very amusing about a heavy sphere. So I will be making a heavy, ominous black cube. Ideally, I have no idea if this will work, which is why it's fun. That's the point of science, is to fail most of the time. I've failed at every single thing in my life, which is why I enjoy my life so much. But anyway, always remember the safety goggles. The most important part of sciencing is to have your proper eye protection. If you do not have your eye protection, you can lose an eye, and that's no good. Now, I need to figure out a way to open this here concrete, so I have a knife. I really got a cough, but I don't want to cough in your ear. I don't know what could be causing that. Maybe I'm getting sick. Probably not the ideal way to cut open the bag, but I think I'll just tape it closed when I'm done. So, here we have... Oh, the dust is just murdering me. Concrete dust. This is what I'll be mixing it in. It used to have chocolate milk, but I drank all the milk because I drink up to 3 gallons of milk a week. Ideally with chocolate, because I like chocolate. Now, do I have a spoon or a shovel? Well, no. Guess I gotta use my hand. So, we want to take that concrete and get that. Now, do remember that concrete is made of cement. Cement is 1, exothermic, and 2, very corrosive. So this actually does hurt to touch. Like, it is hurting my hand. I'm getting burned a little bit by the chemistry there, but not badly. I mean, you can touch concrete. It's just not fun. I mean, there's real manly men out there who do this every day. They're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna pour like 1,000,000 tons of concrete. Now that's a manly task, isn't it? Just pouring concrete day in and day out. However, because I'm not a very manly man, I'm not even a man, I'm a type of android, I will go wash my hand in the science sink. You will still hear me just as fine because remember, you're not recording from the camera's perspective, you're recording from in front of my face. It is important that when you're washing your hand of concrete that you get all of it off, because concrete hardens when it's exposed to water. And you don't really want to make yourself a set of shoes out of this. Although I wasn't using my feet, I was using my hand. Although actually, supposedly concrete shoes was never actually used as a murder method, supposedly. I hope. That'd be terrible. Getting your feet sewn in concrete and getting chucked in the water. At least you drown pretty quick, hopefully. Now, the difference of this concrete and why it turned this black color is because it doesn't use water. It uses this. You say, but wait, you schmuck, you have to add water to concrete. Concrete only reacts to water. It's not going to react to an organic liquid. Well, yes, this is a water-based solution. It is actually syrup, which kind of makes me wonder... Okay, that wasn't my greatest idea. It definitely has a flavor. It's incredibly sweet. Why? Because it's syrup. It's made of sugar. I could show you the whole process of making this, but it's so simple I don't think you need to know. You just heat up water until it's hot, by whatever means necessary, and you pour in white table sugar until it turns sort of yellow and thick. That's some thick water. It tastes like thickness too. Like, this is an incredible amount of sugar. It's always amazing to see how much sugar you can dissolve into water. I mean, this water started out as 2 cups, which that's what the measuring cup is labeled, and I don't know what that is in liters. And now it is 4 cups. So I think it's 50% sugar. It's very, very sweet and warm. So that is what we're going to use to make the concrete. So I'm going to pour that in. Thick. I've got this stick. It's a piece of bamboo from my garden. I'm going to stir it up. It is important to remember that concrete is an exothermic process, so it does generate heat. You definitely don't want to touch it when it's wet, because it will potentially be very hot. Oh, it's all gritty. Listen to that sound of... Basically, I'm a cement mixer. Choo-choo. A little too moist. It's like making a cake. A delicious cement cake. Don't replace cement for the flour. It will harden. Now you want to get it fully moistened. Yeah, I've added too much. As you can tell, I'm not actually a concrete worker. I don't have very much experience working with concrete in its, native environment, which is for useful things, instead of making myself geometric shapes made out of black material. Ugh. My upper body strength isn't adequate for stirring this sludge. Okay. Now I want to make it a little bit moist. A little bit more wet than you would normal concrete. Get plenty of sugar in there. Which does make me wonder a little bit. Well, it tastes like sugar and it's very crunchy. It's not toxic. Not at that dose. Okay, so now I got this gooey stuff. So I take my mold. Now, the mold is not sealed on the bottom because the extra moisture needs to come out somewhere. I got dust in my nose. Oh, it's heavy. I'm going to take that. And we're just going to spoon that all down into that mold. Oh. And when you get to the bottom, something like that might happen, where you hit a part that's suddenly dry because you didn't mix well and you're a stenod. That's actually what they knew me as at one of my old jobs, because I could not do the paperwork properly. They called me the stenod. Ironic, because most of my job in real life is just shuffling paperwork. For minimum wage. Although actually I did get slightly promoted. I now make slightly more than minimum wage. Which is nice. I can afford more concrete. Now the outside of this doesn't feel hot exactly, but it certainly does feel warm. As I'm stirring this, I kind of wonder, like, it's a really long stick. But for something like a school science fair project, I'm kind of surprised kids don't use more concrete. It's very cheap and you can do a lot of stuff with it. Like, what, requirements for water are there? Does it harden under water? Does it harden under oil? Mostly because science fairs, as I said, I'm in my 40s, so most kids don't do science fairs anymore. That's kind of an old people thing. Remnant of a bygone age, but it was always one of my favorite times in school was the science project. You got to do something cool and make a poster. In high school, I was the only one with a double-decker poster. So it's a regular poster board, and then cardboard, and then another poster board. Which inspired me, I guess, to go into science, by which I mean I'm right here poking a cube. It's very weirdly satisfying to poke this. Okay. So, I've got that in the mold. Now, you might be saying, oh, I need a little more. You might be saying, well, now you need a cap for the mold, right? Well, no. I'm repeating what I did to make that other pieces of black material. The process isn't as simple as just letting the concrete sit. Under normal circumstances, like if you wanted to make an ordinary concrete cube, yes, you would set it and forget it and let it just sit here until it hardens. However, for unknown reasons, hold on a second, I've been breathing concrete dust and I probably need to wash my hands because I've got cement on them. But for several reasons, which are largely obtuse to me, or obscure to me, I don't think they're obtuse, although they probably are. Concrete will not harden with sugar in it. Not normally, anyway. I think it interferes with the chemical reaction to an extent, but also it just sort of prohibits normal connections. It's too viscous, it's too gooey. The concrete, if left like this, will not harden. The process to produce those, why those are relatively solid, is not dependent on concrete's normal hardening properties, but rather on pyrolysis. Hence why I kind of described it as a ceramic. So what is pyrolysis? Pyrolysis is when an organic substances are based on carbon, and usually have a lot of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen associated with them. With sugar, I erased it, but I had a map of it for the fermentation project. It's basically a hexose ring with a bunch of, well, it's not hexose because there's an oxygen in the middle, but it has a bunch of hydrogen and oxygen OH groups stuck on the sides. If you were to heat that outside of the presence of oxygen, weird things start to happen where parts come off or connect and it carbonizes and reconnects and pyrolyzes, forming charcoal. Like if you take wood and heat it up without air, it turns into charcoal. The same thing if you're eating my cooking. If you leave it in the oven too long, there's an absence of oxygen, it gets burnt. It turns into that black charcoal-y stuff. It's not really burning, it's pyrolyzing, where the organic molecules are breaking down in the absence of oxygen and forming a high carbon slurry, which is what the sugar stands for here. Why those are the dark color is because of carbon. This process requires pyrolysis at a high temperature, which is how those were made. By cooking it, it causes it to form carbon inside the concrete and turns it black and also gives it a more ceramic-like quality than normal concrete. Now, I think this makes the concrete slightly harder, although I don't really have a way to validate that assumption quite yet. But in accordance with the system that I've used before on those, the key, and I've attempted this several times previously in the era when I made those, the key is to let this dry. It has to dry probably for several days to allow moisture to evaporate. If you try it right now, it'll just boil when you cook it and it will become crumbly. You have to let it dry out until the method that I use is that when you look at the top, if you see crystals of sugar forming, that means it's done and it's ready to be cooked. Otherwise, it's not quite done. So, this will be one of those projects where oh wow, that's heavy. It will probably get lighter when the water evaporates, but not by very much. This is one of those projects where it's going to take multiple filming, so I need to wait a little bit for this to harden. So let me just lean back and jump cut. Okay, back from that jump cut, and as you can see, my table is vastly clearer. Also, it's night. there isn't really time or seasons down here in the basement. But this place, if you just sit here in silence, it makes a lot of weird noises. It's not even a big room, so it's not like somebody's hiding in my washing machine or something. But anyway, this is my lump of concrete that I've allowed to sit for an indeterminate amount of time. Consistency-wise, I mean, it's pretty hard. Taste-wise, well, it tastes quite sweet and kind of like concrete, meaning it's gritty. Which I actually have a piece of leftover material. This was left in the mixing bowl, and it hardened subsequently. And you can kind of see that it looks very similar to dark-colored concrete, aside from the fact that it is, uh, huh. To be honest, I had expected that to be friable. It's not. It's actually pretty hard, except on the edges where it has the consistency of like a hard chocolate. So this is, in theory, pretty hard. The question just is, what is it doing? Well, right now it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there, isn't it? Well, it's the concrete has fully hardened, but it's hardened around a matrix of sucrose, which is what table sugar is made of. Which means that it is like this concrete, but there's a lot of sugar as sugar inside of it, which kind of retains moisture, hence why it's still soft a little bit. It gives it that sort of dark squishiness. It is a little bit tacky, and it holds moisture well, which is kind of gross, and I'm getting stickier by the second. Being sticky is one of my, probably third least favorite non-painful stimuli. The, the most unpleasant being, of course, dampness, or, as you probably know it, moisture. But, what am I going to do to this now? Well, as I said before, it needs to be baked in an oven with great heat, intensity, vigor, and possibly vim. But what am I actually trying to accomplish there? Well, you probably can't see it because of the potato, but on this board I've drawn glucose, which sucrose is half glucose and half fructose, or maybe galactose, stuck together in the middle, but it's close enough. Now, when you burn something in the presence of oxygen, which this room is pretty full of oxygen, it's probably about, I don't know, the atmosphere is usually about 10% oxygen, no, 20% oxygen, and then like 70-something percent nitrogen. Down here, it's probably 10% oxygen, 30% nitrogen. The rest is radon. But what you need to know the difference between, well, maybe not you, I need to know the difference between, because I'm trying to actually make this do something, is that when you cook something in the presence of oxygen, it burns. What happens when something burns? It combines with oxygen to, in this case, if you were burning pure sugar in 100% atmosphere of oxygen, it would generate carbon dioxide and water. All the carbon would turn into carbon dioxide. All of the hydrogen would turn into water. Whatever oxygen glucose has in it gets turned into part of the water. That's not what we want to happen here, and that won't happen here because oxygen can't really reach the inside of a cube of sugar concrete. What we want is the other direction. What happens when there's no oxygen and you heat something up above the temperature at which it would normally burn? Well, that's a phenomenon called pyrolysis. Phenomenon. Phenomenon. As you can see, I've run out of coffee, so it's a little hard for me to keep my energy. But pyrolysis occurs when you have a carbon-containing compound. It doesn't necessarily need to be carbon, but something usually that contains carbon or silicon or something. I've done it with silicon occasionally. It's weird when you do it that way. When working... Don't know if you heard that. Something's moving in that corner, and I don't know what it is. But it's going to stay in that corner, and I'm going to stay in this corner, and we're both going to be fine. But anyway, if you use, like, silica polymers, they're always weird and smelly, and they come out in really weird ways. But I don't have any on me, so we're going to try to do this with a carbon source. What happens when you cook carbon at high temperatures? You probably know this from burning things in the oven, or the microwave if you're really bad at microwaving. It turns black. It turns hard, charcoaly. What that is you are causing the carbon to semi-combust. It's losing hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen in weird ways, but the carbon is kind of staying behind and well, not really crystallizing, because if it really crystallized, you'd have like a diamond, which you could potentially do if you were working at like 100 atmospheres of pressure, but we can't do that because I don't have a pressurizer. But what it causes is this sort of residue of mostly carbon, which is not burnt, it's called burnt, but it's actually charred, which is what charcoal is. If you cook, I think I mentioned that before. There's a time delay between when I film the first part and when I film the second one, because I had to wait for this to harden, but I'll reiterate that charcoal is when you take wood, heat it without oxygen, and it turns into a high carbon fuel similar in structure to coal. It's not really coal, but it works kind of the same way. Coal is a different process entirely. So what I aim to do is to pyrolyze this cube. Now, now there's noises coming from over there. And over there. This whole place is probably haunted, but ghosts aren't real, so that's not really my problem. Now, in order to heat this, first we have to seal it in a way that prevents oxygen from reaching it. To do that, I shall use some of this. Now, I don't know if anyone will ever watch these, and I don't know where anyone will ever watch these, but if you're in Europe, you call this stuff probably aluminium foil. Since I'm not in Europe, obviously, based on this voice, we call this lum num. It's also, for those of you who are astute enough to have recognized my mathematical error in one of my previous videos, it was something I noticed eventually, or was brought to my attention, or will be brought to my attention, because I haven't actually posted any of these yet by the time I'm making this, and I figure some of you will notice it. Aluminum is one possible solution to the mathematical error. You can probably hear that sound. Why do I have so much of this stuff? Well, I was trying to build an electric fence in my backyard where this would be the grounding material. It didn't work. Also, don't touch an electric fence with a shovel you're holding. It kind of hurts. But anyway. Like wrapping the world's worst present. Now, it is important to do this, considering that I lack the foresight to make the mold out of metal. Because metal doesn't, well, metal does burn, but it doesn't burn under normal conditions, but wood does. So if I were to put this in the oven and have oxygen exposed to it, the wood would, well, wood, and it wouldn't be wood anymore. It would be like having a woodchuck. They chuck wood all the time. They don't actually. There's like a million of them outside. They're kind of terrifying. But the wood will catch on fire. You don't really want to start a fire unless you want to start a fire. I usually want to start a fire, but not right now. So you want to make real good care that the air don't get in there. Now that also you're trying to prevent the, there will be off-gassing. Now what is off-gassing? The materials in here as they convert will release some level of gas, which is called smoke usually, but there's other materials in it. What smoke is really complicated chemically. Ideally, I want that to stay in here, because I don't want to be smelling it. I think 3 layers should do the trick. It's like making a baked potato. Except you can't, well, it is sugar, so you probably could eat it. Although as I'm doing it, one interesting piece of trivia about baked potatoes that you probably should know, consider a public service announcement. Never wrap a baked potato in aluminum foil, cook it, and then allow it to cool without removing the foil. Because it creates, like this, an anaerobic environment with no oxygen. And what happens when you bake a potato? It kills all the bacteria except Clostridium spores. So they survive, they can survive the temperature. When it's sealed without oxygen, Clostridium grows really well. It contaminates the potato and causes botulism. It's very rare that that happens, but you shouldn't eat potatoes that have been stored that way. Botulism is actually relatively rare in North America. Much more rare than people tell you. Okay, so this is wrapped in 3 layers of aluminum foil. or aluminum foil, as we call it in America. 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 Although, let's see. Product of United States, Brazil, China, and Armenia. Huh. I didn't know Armenia was a country. I know it was a place, but I didn't know it was a country. I didn't know they made aluminum foil. That's nice. It's next to that other country that I can't pronounce, but that I knew existed that doesn't like them. Okay, so this is wrapped up and ready to be put in the oven for I don't know how long, and I don't know how hot. I'm going to target around 475 degrees because paper burns at 451, if everyone who's read Fahrenheit 451, which is an interesting high school book, but I don't know if I'd recommend reading it on its own because it's actually kind of dull and old-fashioned. But this goes in the oven. I will probably just go play Fallout 4 because that game is very current when I made these videos, and cook it until I feel like taking it out, and hopefully it will not catch on fire. So that's going to require another jump cut right about now. Okay, back from the jump cut. It's always a little weird when I do that because for you, depending on how I end up editing this, it looks like it goes instantaneously, but for me it's like 24 hours. Hence why I'm wearing a different shirt. I have a lot of these. Uh, Also, focus testing says that the lab coat open looks better than the lab coat focus testing also says, you knob, you should learn how to speak. There's actually no focus testing. I'm just guessing because none of these have been posted by the time I'm doing this. Regardless, I have here, I'm very excited. It's still warm. I don't know why it's still warm because the last time I cooked it was like 7 hours ago, but it holds heat well. I don't know what's in here at the moment. I know what I put in, but I don't know what it's turned into. I cooked it for quite a while. 475 degrees for most of last night and a lot of today. It's been cold outside, and rather than turn on the heat, I just turn on the stove and cook something in it. Sometimes bread, but this is tastier than bread. You haven't had my bread, so don't criticize that comment. Now, let's see. This is a flathead, so first, let me reach over and get myself a Phillips head, because that's the type of screws I used in here. Now, strictly speaking, to open something doesn't require eye protection, but I'm going to use the eye protection anyway, because the last time I tried to pyrolyze something, it exploded in my face. This shouldn't explode because it's already been cooked, and I don't think it'll be very lively. I feel like a 19th century British person about to open a mummy. With the unwrapping parties where they'd buy a mummy and the upper class people would stand around and unwrap it for some reason, which, if you think about it, most of those mummies were probably counterfeit. Like, you know, the Persian princess thing is a modern version of it, but, I mean, it was the 19th century, science hadn't been invented yet. You know, off a guy in Egypt, wrap him up, bury him in the sand, wait a month, he dries out, sell him to a British guy for a bunch of money. You can get paid for just finding a corpse. Finding a corpse. But anyway, let's unwrap this mummy. Now, the aluminum is largely unchanged. It isn't expected to be changed at 450 Fahrenheit, not Celsius, because this is the land of freedom. And also, temperatures are... Americans do use the metric system, but temperatures are almost always in Fahrenheit because we don't have a mental grasp of what Celsius temperatures actually are. Liquids are almost always measured in, whatever, liters. That's the word for it. Okay, interestingly enough, the wood remains largely unchanged, which kind of indicates to me the possibility that it was not cooked hot or long enough. It's a little bit crispy. Notice there's some difficulty because the hot glue joints completely liquefied and pooled in the bottom, gluing the aluminum to the wood, as glue is apt to do. It's probably hard on your ears to listen to this, but it's not hard on mine. It's Smells like a pine wood pizza. So, there is a good chance that it's not adequately pyrolyzed as is, but it should be hard enough to, at the very least, remove from the mold and give, if it needs it, another trip through the oven. Or it could completely collapse in my hands. That's a strong possibility. I mean, that's the fun of something like this. I've never done this before, so I don't know if it'll fail or succeed. And there's no point in just giving you demonstrations where I know what's going to happen. The whole point of science and the whole point of life really is failure. If you haven't failed 3 times by the time you get downstairs for breakfast, you're having a bad day already. I've failed almost everything in my life. It's why I am, well, it's why I'm a schmuck. My schmuckery is a direct product of my continuous and unrelenting failure at every aspect of my life. Which is why my life is, well, my life is not exactly fun. But it's so much more fun to fail than if I had succeeded at everything. If I had succeeded at everything, I'd be much poorer and much less happy. Which is a weird thing to say considering my current state. I don't know, that's just kind of an epiphany I had just now. That is a nice feeling when you're just walking around and then suddenly you get hit with an epiphany. I don't know if other people do that, but I think most of the time, because I don't, as you can kind of tell from the fact that I live in a basement, this is weirdly well stuck together. I don't interact with people very much, so I mostly just sit and think constantly. I go to work, and all I do, well, most of what I do is just shuffling paperwork and moving liquids. So I just sit and I think things. Oh, that is stuck. I was hoping the wood would be like charcoal, but I really did not get the temperature high enough to actually do that. If you really wanted good pyrolysis, a kiln? Oh man, the things I could do with a kiln. If you shove this in a kiln at like 1,000 degrees, that'd be fun. But my stove only goes up to like 500, and I don't want to turn it all the way up because I'm afraid I'll damage something. Possibly myself, although I'm generally pretty flame resistant. Okay, it's unscrewed. Let's pull off the mold. Well, it's definitely got an odor. Very strong odor of pine. This wood is pine. Most lumber in the United States is either pine or fir. There is a difference. If you don't know the difference, you don't spend a lot of time around trees. Ugh. It did. Ugh. Okay. I'm making progress. Huh. It's a good thing I had that flathead. Generally speaking, it's not the best idea to use a screwdriver to pry something, but it is possible. Okay. As you can see, it's very... Ooh, there's an echo. As you can see, it's very lumpy. And not 100% ideal, but it is very cubic. Not really. Well, yeah, it's more cubic than I kind of expected, although you can see there's definitely aggregate and wood fiber stuck into it. The question is, did it pyrolyze well? The answer is... it's okay. I can still taste the sugar a little. But it's definitely hard. I mean, I would not want to get hit with this. And it's definitely in a roughly cubic shape. I mean, it's not falling apart. It's not crumbling. That's pretty good. I mean, I might have to give it another go just to make sure, but I don't know. It came out pretty nice to me. And you're questioning, obviously, why did I just watch this? You probably didn't watch this. You probably didn't sit through all the way to the end. But if you are hearing me, then you did sit all the way through to the end, which I commend you on your perseverance. Why did I create a concrete cube that formerly contained probably half a bag of sugar? I don't need reasons to do what I do. But it's very satisfying to hold a cube, to just have a cube-shaped object that is heavy. It's nice. Now, I could paint it. I could actually, I mean, if this cube were good enough, I could paint on it and turn it into a rock die. Criticism primarily that I have is, as you can see, there is, you know, it's an imperfect surface. That is because I used aggregate concrete instead of just raw cement. Just raw cement would probably produce a more consistent surface, which I could then paint more reliably. This is kind of rough. Consider it a prototype, because I've never done this before. It's warm, and it's fun. It makes a nice bookender, I guess. Is that what they're called? Don't know. Recovered all my screws. I've got plenty of gross wood. I don't know. I find it very satisfying. I don't know if you do, but hopefully you found it at least somewhat interesting to see this epic concrete cube I've made out of sugar and cement. And that's just about all I've got for this project. I mean, unless I come revisit the cube and find a something on Earth that this is practical for, because right now it's not practical for anything, hence sort of the joy in creating it. I'm actually... Oh, excuse me. I ate too much pasta. I've gotten too excited with my cube, and now I'm giving myself indigestion. I might have to change the audio a bit to eliminate that. Maybe I'll just cut this section out. I don't actually know how to do that with Flowblade, so you're going to have to bother with it anyway. Moral of the story is, cubes are really exciting. Also, don't eat too much pasta in one sitting. I think that concludes my time with this experiment. I'm going to do something. Probably clean all this up. You can't see it because it's off camera, but I had to bring my entire garden inside, and it's going to go over there. Maybe I'll make a video showing you how to operate the underground garden, because that's a cool thing you can do. Everybody needs an indoor garden that's hidden in their basement so that nobody can see it. So that's it for this episode. Remember that you don't need to like and subscribe. This video might not even ever be posted and isn't monetized, so it doesn't actually matter if you like or subscribe. Additionally, follow me on Instagram. I could put the link down below, but you all have brains. Figure it out. That's it. Extra.